Something I come across from time to time is people mentioning they used a guide in order to beat a game like it's a bad thing, something that should be counted against them. It almost sounds like a confession sometimes. Yeah, I beat this game, but I had to use a guide. But I'm here to say, who cares? And sure, there's nothing wrong with feeling a sense of accomplishment for beating a game without a guide. Heck, I've done this myself, but if playing a game with a guide would make the game more enjoyable, then I don't see why not. I think the shame in using a guide comes from this fear that you'll end up diminishing the sense of accomplishment you'd feel from beating the game. So what you gotta do is weigh how much beating a game without a guide would mean to you compared to how much using a guide would remove the potential frustration you'd encounter trying to figure things out. And it's not like this can't vary from game to game, or perhaps even from playthrough to playthrough. Let me give you some examples. I beat Shadow of the Colossus without a guide, and that was a lot of fun for me. A lot of people do use a guide for this game, but for me the time spent trying to figure out how to topple each Colossus was worth it and made the playthrough really rewarding. Then there's Super Metroid, which is a game I opted to use a player's guide for and felt like that really enhanced the experience for me. Just navigating all the different maps in these pages felt like a game in itself and was really fun to plot out where I wanted to go next. However, for my next playthrough, I may want to try to play through it without a guide and see how much I remember. I don't know. I should also point out that sometimes the purpose of a guide isn't strictly to help you get through the game, but rather it can also be to make sure you don't miss any of the cool extras along the way. A lot of games have some neat stuff on the side, and for some games, trying to do a completionist run where you get 100% can make having a guide be a lot more fun, and in some cases damn near essential. Time is also a pretty big factor in all of this. Most of us have more than a few games sitting in our collection that we haven't beaten yet, and in that regard we only have so much time to play all these games. So we may just simply not have the time to try to figure out how to make it through some of these games without a guide. These days guides aren't just limited to physical books either. You can look up help online, and the most notable way to do this is by watching a YouTube video, either with somebody explaining what to do or perhaps with just no commentary if you find that to be annoying. I've never really used that method to play through an entire game, but I have used it for when I was stuck at a particular part. Let me tell a story that I can practically guarantee almost every one of you has experienced at least once, if not multiple times. So you're sitting there playing a game and just having a great time doing so. All of a sudden you reach a part of the game where you get stuck. You then proceed to try everything you can possibly think of until, in your mind, you've exhausted every possible solution. Now is when you crack, and at this point you're pissed off at the game, rationalizing that you must use a guide to figure out what to do next because the solution is either some super cryptic bullcrap you'd never think to do in a million years, or possibly that the game is just broken. You look up what to do and come to find the solution was something obvious sitting right there in front of you. Oh, it turns out the problem was that I'm the world's biggest idiot. But never again, and that was a one-time situation where you needed to look up help. But then, not long after, there you are, once again stuck. You think, this time I know I'm not crazy, and something is wrong with the game. You look it up, and once again the solution is something you feel you should have thought of. Now, maybe there's been some times when it actually was something you never would have thought of, but I've always found it really amusing how our brain works when we run into a wall. Because there is a chance that it could be some ridiculous solution you'd never think of. You get stuck debating whether or not to look up help because you just don't know at that point if the solution is something obvious you're missing or super cryptic. Something else I find myself doing every now and then is needing help in a game early on, but then never again for the rest of the game. This is usually because I need to get a sense of how the game works. How am I supposed to be approaching certain puzzles, or perhaps just how different mechanics and items should be used. Every game requires your brain to think a certain way, and I found that usually once you figure that out, for the games that are well designed, they follow a common thread, which of course leads to satisfying progression. It should also be noted that of course different games provide different kinds of challenges. In this video, I've been talking a lot about games that have what I like to call what the hell do I do or where the hell do I go type of difficulty. Some of the more linear retro games, most notably 2D platformers and action platformers, typically have challenge where it's obvious what to do, it's just a matter of it being hard to do whatever that is. So help for those games generally has to do more with strategy than anything else. Although I will say that quite a few bosses will have patterns that can be hard to figure out in order to hit them enough while also avoiding being hit so that you can beat them. It's not that a lot of the more traditional side-scrolling 2D games don't have secrets though. I mean, just look at Super Mario World. There's a whole bunch of additional secret levels that you can unlock. It would be a shame to never unlock those if you ask me, with or without a guide. And of course, some secrets are hidden better than others. For example, in the Donkey Kong Country games, the secrets are a lot more intuitive defined in the second and third games as opposed to the first one, where some of the secrets are just ridiculous and will have you jumping into pits of death because you think there might be a secret barrel there. I don't regret looking up the secrets in that game one bit. I'd also like to address this idea that using a guide for a game is cheating. Cheating who? The cartridge? You're not even playing against another person. It's a single player game where you get to dictate your own experience. That's what makes video games so great. We get to cater the experience to our own preferences, whether it be which consoles we play, which games we play, or how we want to play them. Also, if it really matters to somebody so much that they beat a game without a guide, what's to stop them from just lying about it? I mean, I don't condone lying, but if I wanted to tell you all that I've beaten Battletoads, I could be full of shit and you'd all be none the wiser. Now, obviously I wouldn't do that because I think that's stupid and I want you all to trust me, but I just wanted to point that out because I'm sure there are people who lie about that stuff. Anyways, a lot of these player's guides and strategy guides from back in the day now serve the purpose of being collector's items as well. I mean, some of them sure fetch collector-like prices. One of the notable ones is the Earthbound guide, which actually came with the game instead of a regular manual inside the now famous big box. I used this book to play the game just because it feels like part of the intended experience, since it seems like they really wanted you to use it by including it with the game. There's a lot of fun guides that you can find for older games, and it's something I feel a good chunk of collectors forget to consider. It could be fun to have for one of your favorite games, and some of them can be cheap too. One last thing I'd like to share before I wrap up is something kind of goofy I did. I cut out all the Nintendo Power magazine sections for most of the Super Nintendo games I own and put them all into a binder. They're not full guides for the games, but I find them to be fun companions. Kind of a weird thing to do, but I enjoyed doing it. Alright, well I think that's about all I have to say about using guides. Like always, I would love to hear what all of you have to say about it. Do you typically use guides or not? And if you do, what type of games do you use them for? So be sure to leave those answers or any other thoughts you may have down below in the comments, and I will see ya in the next video.